Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thinking Thursday. Glad to have you here. We're going to wait just a few moments as everybody gets on to the webinar. Okay, looks like we're starting to get everybody on here. I hope you are doing well and had a great week. Okay, well, it looks like we're getting about everybody is joining on, so we will get started. Welcome and good morning to Thinking Thursday. Welcome. This is really a program that we do not quite every month, but close to it here at the Kalispell Chamber of Commerce, bringing our local businesses great information, timely information that you can take back to your work as soon as the presentation is over and is presented by our members with particular expertise in different areas of business. So we're really happy to have you here. This is our second one via Zoom, and really just hope you enjoy today's presentation. Couple quick housekeeping items before we get going. This presentation is being recorded, and all things being equal, if we don't have any technical glitches, we will have it up on our website for future reference afterward, and we'll also be able to send any of y'all the slide deck from Phil, our presenter, afterward. Questions, we'll have opportunity for questions. We'll take those at the end, and that'll be via the Q&A feature, which you'll see either on the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on your Zoom layout. And you can type that in there, and then we'll go through those at the end. We will have some polling as well during this presentation, and that is all anonymous too. So hope you'll enjoy interacting with that. So today's presentation from Phil Quigley really is going to be so timely with so much that's gone on here over the last few months. Phil is the owner of Phil Quigley and Associates, and if you've not had a chance to meet Phil or see his presentations previously, he's just a dynamic speaker with just a wealth of experience through a number of different companies and consulting and working around the world. He has his own talent development consultancy here in Kalispell, where he creates learning solutions for high-performing cultures and teams. He's worked with Facebook in India, he's worked with Bank of America, Yahoo, Macy's, and many, many others. So great domestic and international experience. So hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and right now I'm going to turn this over to Phil. Phil, if you'd like to go ahead and open up your audio and video here, we will get rolling.
Well, thank you, Jen. Thank you very much. And thank you for a great introduction. And by the way, some of what you said is actually true, so that's even better. So it's a pleasure to be with you this morning, and hopefully I think what we're going to be talking about is something that's relevant to everybody. This morning, the Department of Labor just announced that another 2.5 million people just applied for unemployment compensation, which means that we have now almost 40 million Americans who are experiencing the pangs and pains of unemployment. They're going through some massive changes this morning. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means and how we can cope with those kinds of changes. And as you can see, I hope on this first slide here, the future ain't what it used to be. And that was stated by Yogi Berra, who was a former New York Hall of Fame catcher and at one time manager of both the Mets and the New York Yankees. I think that really is relevant because for all of us looking ahead into the future, it has changed dramatically. And what we're looking for is finding ways to predict that future, but also how to cope with it and how to be resilient and strong in the face of it. So the title of the presentation is How to Face a Future of Constant Change with Courage, Confidence, and Compassion. Bring your best self to work every day and help your people, if you're a leader, navigate the challenges of a changing workplace here in the Valley. And then I've got a very special tool that I think you'll get a kick out of that I think will help you not only build a culture of collaboration and fun, but help people to cope with that change in the best way that they possibly can. I love I heard Anthony Fucci the other day talking about how Americans are really leading changes in effect like the Marvel superheroes that you see here. We've learned how to, for example, practice good hygiene. We sanitize and wash our hands frequently. We learn how to socially and physically distance ourselves. At the same time, we're testing and we're wearing masks. So he says that Americans have really demonstrated resilience, which is really how to face adversity with grit and grace, at the same time be ready for the changes that we face. So that's kind of the background that we're going to face here. And I like this little comment here, taking charge of change, leading from the front. In times of wrenching change, people desperately want to trust that their leaders have their best interests at heart. So this workshop is all about how we can recognize change, embrace it, implement it, and then champion that change for our people, both on the job and in our lives. So change the Flathead Valley, change is really causing something to be different. And I do like the quote here from John Kotter, who is the professor of leadership at the Harvard Business School. And by the way, author of the book, Leading Change. He says, with the relentless changes and escalating uncertainties that define our times, the need for strong leadership in business, government, and society has never been greater. Leading change is everyone's burning priority today more than ever. And as leaders here, as business leaders, whether you're the owner or a senior contributor, your role is helping your people cope with that change and lead through it and effectively administer and adapt to the changes that we face. So a quick activity, as you look forward to reopening your business here, what one workplace change will keep you up at night? This is the poll here. Number one, will it be winning back customers who may have forgotten that you're there, or retaining people? Sometimes keeping good people is a major challenge. Rebuilding your brand, letting people know what you're all about, or a new role that you might have adopted at work. Maybe you've got a change in your position or title. What would that be? What one workplace change? We'll just pick one. Which one?
Bill, we've got the polling open, and we will wrap it up here in about 10 seconds as everybody gets their votes in, and then I'll share that.
Dan, you are just a great wingman here. I really appreciate this. Okay. Well, as you can see, the bars are pretty even here. It looks like winning back customers, about 35% of our folks are concerned about that. Retaining good people, rebuilding the brand, and then a new role at work. So I think winning back customers and keeping our people seem to be the issues that are going to keep you up at night here. So thanks for the morning polling, and I think the caffeine just kicked in. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. How can we, at changing times, keep our customers close to us, and at the same time keep our best people? So part of what we're going to be talking about are some tools that will help you do that as we go through these changing times. So the workshop objectives are pretty clear. Number one, what are the common reactions that people have to change? All of us react differently to changes, some much more resiliently than others. How to anticipate, embrace, champion, and then implement change. How about your team? How do they react to change? And how do you keep them experiencing it both successfully and with good humor? And finally, what I call a force multiplier. This is a tool that I really like. I like practical tools that people can put to work right away. And this is a tool that I think will help you not only keep your people involved and excited, but also reimburse and burnish your brand at the same time. So that's kind of the track we're going to run on here. So what we'll discuss and explore in more detail, the dynamics of change, what I call the change curve. And this is based on some of the work of John Kotter, by the way. How to champion change, how to really get behind it. And then delegation, what I call the change killer app, something that will help you implement change with a lot of verve and energy and fun at the same time. So let's talk a little bit about the dynamics of change. And this is a little bit of theory, but here's another poll before we get to that. Good leaders like you drive change and you make things happen. And Gandhi once said, we must be the change we want to see in the world. So which one of these people listed below, in your opinion, just one, drove or is driving change right now in the world? Number one, would it be Jeff Bezos? I think we all know him, Amazon founder, richest man in the world, certainly changed the way we shop. He's got a new company called Blue Origin, which wants to put a man in the moon in 5 years. Gandhi, the Indian thought leader and father of nonviolence, who helped to inspire people like Nelson Mandela and certainly Martin Luther King. Greta Thunberg, and thank you, Jen, for getting me to change the punctuation and the spelling there. She's this young 17-year-old Swedish girl who's probably done more to make people aware of the dangers of climate change than all the scientists in the world, and she did it when she's 17. And then Winston Churchill, who I liked a lot, whose rhetoric in the dark days of World War II helped to galvanize the English people to stand up and defy Hitler. He said words like, we will fight from the rooftops, we will fight in the landing zones, we will fight on the beaches, we will never surrender. So take a minute, think about this for a second, and who do you think drove or is driving change most effectively? So take a minute to do the poll, if you will. Well, I have another sip of coffee. So, wow. This is amazing. Usually when we do this, it's Bezos that gets the lion's share. He did again here, but Churchill was number 2. Interesting. By the way, if you're a reader, there's a wonderful book, I think, that just came out earlier this year called The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Larson. It's all about Churchill, a very intimate portrait of him, not only as a leader, a wartime leader, but also as a family man, an intimate portrait of what he was like when he was not working. So thank you again. So these are people that are change drivers. And by the way, you are a change driver too, and we'll talk a little bit about some ways to do that. So thank you for the poll. Thanks, Jen, for riding shotgun there. So here's some of the business realities that drive change. Certainly, we all know about COVID-19. We're dealing with it right now in our lives. Shifting customer demand. More and more customers are buying things online, and they have new deals and new openings and new opportunities. The cost to do business. We know it's getting higher and higher as we compete in a tough marketplace. The needs of an ever-changing workforce. We're dealing with a blended workforce of millennials and Gen Xers and now Gen Zs. We'll talk a little bit more about how we can engage them productively in the workplace. We have more information, unfiltered. Some of it's real, some of it's fake. We are dealing with it all the time. How do we parse that information and make sense of it? Competition. Razor thin margins, especially here in the Valley where so many of our businesses are retail oriented or tourism related, thin margins. Mind-bending rate of technological change. We're all using new tools, new software. Heard the other day, Mark Miley, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, talking about how his new technology teams are dealing with artificial intelligence and robotics and looking at that battlefield of the future, which will be dramatically changed. And then finally, environmental concerns. Well, right now we're dealing, for example, with massive flooding in Midland, Michigan, where Dow Chemical is headquartered. We're thinking about the impact of global warming and climate change as we locate our businesses and we deal with the changing marketplace. And then some of the organizational change initiatives. What are really happening online here? Mergers and acquisitions. How do we cope with change when our company is about to be either merged or acquired by another organization? Social consciousness. More and more people are concerned about organizations that have a social footprint. How much pollution are we emitting, and what are we doing in the local community to make sure that we're supporting good causes. So many of our local companies here support food banks and homeless folks. And very often those initiatives drive change. Job roles, people reducing. Right now we talked about the number of people who've lost their job. That major changes. You may be accepting a new role at work too. Restructuring or downsizing, technology, the effect of modern technology and software, new processes, and then a business plan. How is our strategy changing? So these are some of the changes that we deal with. We deal with them every day, and we're pretty good at this, by the way. So if you think about some of the other changes, I kind of run through this from aviation technology, aviation automation. We go from stick and rudder, the old Super Connie on your left here of the screen, to fly-by-wire with the new 787 Dreamliner by United Airlines and made by Boeing. From the driveway, changes in package delivery, from driving up to your house to your doorstep. And now Jeff Bezos and our friends at Amazon are experimenting with robots to deliver goods to your door. How about the changing world of shopping? From brick and mortar, on the left-hand side, you see Macy's, which just laid off almost 50,000 people and is changing their format from online or from retail, from brick and mortar to online. We know that J. Crew just declared bankruptcy, as did Neiman Marcus and did J.C. Penney, and it's all because we can now do so much shopping by just clicking on our mouse just a few clicks away. And then hospitality. Restaurants may never be the same. Right now, as the governor opens up, I think phase 2 on June 1st, more and more restaurants will be opening up, and you're going to go from sit-down dining, which we all kind of like, to curbside pickup or delivery, or maybe self-distancing, where tables are at least 6 to 8 feet apart. So lots of changes, especially in hospitality. How about lifestyles? Honey, let's just stay home tonight and stream Tiger King from the big screen, from theaters that we used to sit down to the small screen, or to our laptop, or to our mobile device. In fact, a number of movie theaters are now thinking about, how are they going to open up again, especially when we've gotten so used to streaming, whether it be Hulu or Netflix or Amazon Prime. So major changes in the way we entertain ourselves. And I love this one, gender roles in the military, the times they are a-changing. Here on the left side of your screen is Pappy Boyington of the United States Marine Corps. And he's got all of his Japanese kills on the side of his Corsair fuselage here. Pappy was an icon, a great Marine Corps aviator. And then to the new Corps, and this is a young lady by the name of Annalise Stotz. She is the first United States Marine Corps female pilot of the F-35G. And the F-35, by the way, is probably the most sophisticated airplane in terms of its capabilities. It is the hallmark of our aviation future. Stealth, fly-by-wire, an amazing airplane, very versatile, and she's one of the female pilots that flies that, a first ever in the Corps, by the way. So changes are changing even in the Marine Corps, which is pretty hidebound. And then from climate apathy to climate awareness, from global warming to global warning. And again, that's from Greta Thunberg, the young Swede, who's made us more and more aware of the dangers of our environmental catastrophes facing us right now. Unsung heroes, medical caregivers, they're heroes. And then now we're also honoring people who deliver our mail, who drive trucks, who stand behind us at the counters at both the Costco and all of the grocery stores around the area. Retail service workers are on the front lines, and we're honoring them as well. And they're changing their role. They're becoming much more concerned about safety, personal safety, and hygiene. So the new world of work, and this is, I think, an interesting survey that was done by Wilson, Towers, and Watson. As we face this new world of work, 59% of companies that they polled, 200 of which they talked to, expect work from home policies to remain in effect. In fact, if you remember, just recently, both Google and Twitter announced that they will now have permanent working from home or remote working options. If you want to work from home, if you're working for Twitter, you can do it in perpetuity. 49% expect to continue offering flexible working arrangements, making it easy for people to work at home. 88% will offer health and safety tips, how to keep sanitized during these tough times. 84% will provide advice on working from home. How can you maximize your output when you're not at the office? How do you cope with the fact that you are not enjoying those social interactions, those hallway consultations? 64% anticipate facing higher levels of employee stress and anxiety. And I think more and more companies are concerned about when we get back to work, how are people going to deal with this? Are they still concerned about possibly losing their job or changing their job, or perhaps having reduced pay or reduced benefits? And then 36 believe changes are improving employee productivity. People kind of getting a kick out of working from home. I've talked to a number of people who find that they can get a lot more done by working at home with their schedule than having to go to work where they've got meetings and interruptions that sometimes get in the way. And then finally, 63% say changes are having a positive impact on their culture, on how we work together. So this is input from a May 2020 survey of 200 US companies, and again, across multiple industries. So even the way that we work is changing. How the work gets done, from conventional offices to unconventional offices, where we're working with the laptop on our lap, as I am right now, next to your cat or your puppy. And then workplace changes. What's the new role of the leader? Is it the old hierarchical, old school boss, the top-down management, or a new wave leader who is really more of a coach and a confidant than a boss? So talent changes in the workforce. Most of them today, especially the Gen Xers and Gen Ys and millennials, are aware of what good jobs look like. They know, for example, that what they want in a job has to be at least three things. Number one, they typically want autonomy, especially millennials and Gen Zs. They want to have a feeling that they can make important decisions that impact the work. Number two, they want mastery, the feeling that as they work, they're learning and growing new skills that can help them be more effective on the job. And then finally, a kind of a buzzword called transcendent purpose, which is mean that somehow, in some important way, what I do counts, that in whatever way it is, I may be making a contribution that makes the world a little bit better place. I want to feel important on the job. So if we can incorporate those factors into a job, that means you're going to retain your workforce for a longer period of time. They seek work that defines their purpose. If you talk a lot about the millennials today, they'll say, look, I want a job where I can see a real line of sight between what I'm doing and how it impacts society. What purpose, what noble role am I fulfilling? They think it's part of a blended lifestyle. I remember I gave a workshop a couple of years ago, and it was to a group of people in the construction trades business. And they were talking about dealing with millennials and how difficult it was to get these guys fired up to work. So I said, well, what do you do if you're concerned about their work style? They kept complaining that the millennials, all they wanted to do was play with their mobile devices. They wanted to play, you know, and work with just the mobile teams. So I said, well, what do you do about that? Well, we give these terrible jobs, the really routine, demeaning jobs. Well, what happens at that point? Then, well, then they quit. So is that really what you want? No, we want people who are productive, who care about the work. And also, very often today, people want that lifestyle where they have time to recreate. We're living in Montana, where we've got some of the greatest recreational outdoor opportunities in the world. So people want to take advantage of that. They want work that complements their lifestyle. And they look to their leaders as conduits to make that organization and culture happen. People look to you as a leader to define what their purpose is, help them understand what the goals of the business are, align them with your vision, and the boss is the person they trust. So I think you have an amazing role in helping people move, I think, smoothly and seamlessly through change. And how the changes impact the workplace. Number one, typically people are looking from an organization that's moving from highly stratified, highly organized to a much more agile organization, a leaner organization, if you will. They're looking more from annual reviews away from that to continuous conversation. I found, especially in my work in Silicon Valley, people used to dread the annual performance review. You know, that's where your boss calls you together and kind of tells you what he thinks about you. And people just hated that because very often their perception of what they've contributed and what their boss's perception, they were vastly different. And the reason was they didn't communicate very well. And finally, from managers as bosses, as hierarchical, you know, dictators, if you will, to managers as coaches, somebody who aligns with your goal and your vision. And then focusing not on weaknesses, to focusing on strengths. Take an example. For example, if your son or daughter came home after school and brought their, I guess they still do report cards these days, but they show you your report card, and Susie or Johnny shows the card, and it has the following. There's 3 B's, an A, and an F. Now, do you think in your heart of hearts, which of these 3 grades or particular grades would you focus on? Most people will focus on the F. They'll focus on the weakness. And what we really want to talk about is organizations that help to focus, not to ignore weaknesses, because we can't do that. We have to work with them. But if you focus on strengths, helping people do what they do best, you're going to find that they're more and more excited and engaged and will work harder than if you focus merely on the critical parts of their weaknesses. So, change and transition. Change is a catalytic event that happens quickly. It causes something to be different. Transition is defined as passing from one state or condition to another. It's a gradual process. That's important to keep in mind. So change, which we're all going through and have been going through for the last several weeks now, can lead to feelings of loss. And by the way, this is based on the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who did the defining work on death and dying, what people feel in moments of extreme pressure and danger. Number 1 is denial. These are the 5 stages that people pass through when dealing with life. Number 1, denial. Hey, this can't happen to me. You know, I'm better than that. Can't be true. Denial. Anger. Hey, man, why is this happening to me at this time? I don't deserve this. I'm better than that. Or bargaining. You know, just give me one more chance. If I can only have one more month or one more opportunity, give me one more chance. Depression. Hey, man, I'm miserable. Nothing ever works out for me. Or acceptance. Finally, it's not what I planned, but, you know, I can live with it. These are typically the stages that go through people in dealing with loss or massive change. Some people do it much more accountably and rapidly. Other people, it takes a little bit more time. And again, this is again based on the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. As you can see, first of all, shock and denial. People avoid the change. This is not true. I can't be dealing with this. I'm confused. I'm numb. I'm overwhelmed. They get angry then. They get frustrated and FUD, fear, anxiety, and doubt, irritation, embarrassment, shame. If you've suddenly lost your job, people are oftenly affected with the feelings of shame, that I'm a victim here. Depression and detachment, feeling out of it, feeling isolated and alienated, especially working from home sometimes when we've been shut down over the last several weeks here, encouraged to stay home. We feel a little bit detached from reality. And we get overwhelmed. We get the laws. We get we don't have energy, and we feel helpless. And then finally, as you begin to make some internal dialogues here, dialogue and bargaining, I'm beginning to reach out to other people. How are others dealing with this? How about I want to tell my story to other people. I want to share the kinds of feelings that I have with others. And I find, what's the meaning of this? Is there something more important here that I'm missing? And then eventually acceptance, maybe resignation. It's going to happen. I might as well get used to it. And maybe I need to plan something that's going to help me be more productive. And then eventually, hopefully, we return to meaningful functioning where we feel empowered. We feel a little bit more secure. Our self-esteem is beginning to return, and we feel really meaning in our life. Now, this cycle, as you can see from this next slide, starts with a trigger. And some of them are the reorganization that we might find about here. A new company, a new program, or a new product new leadership, a new boss that takes over. The technical changes, more and more companies experiencing new technologies in software development, payroll processing and automation, changing the way we work, restructuring, our new role, direction. Maybe the company is going to change direction a little bit, and you may be facing that as you reopen your business. And then finally, a new boss. So these are some of the triggers that start with that change. And if you think about it, typically most people go through 4 phases of this transition. One is called reactive, and the other is called responsive. Creative is the 3rd phase, and then the productive phase. And the reactive phase is, we talked about before, shock, denial, anger, concern. And then we begin in the responsive phase. We begin to say, okay, it's happening, and I better get used to it. And the creative phase is, well, how can I make it happen? What can we do? What are some options that we can explore to make our organization vibrant and productive during these tough changes? And then finally, the productive. Hey, it's going to happen. We've got some plans in place. We know where we're going. We're moving ahead. So again, 4 phases. How do I react? How do I respond? What can we do to be creative? And then finally, the productive phase. So if you take a look at your organization right now, where would you think you fall? Here's how it happens in the team area. For example, in a team, if you have a reactive phase, people feel a little bit confused. Who's in charge right now? There might be some conflict. We're going to compete for resources during these times of change. We all talk about how we've got to get a higher yield out of scarcer resources. Budgets are typically being cut. What can we do at that particular time? How do we react to that? How about as we deal with these changes, maybe I want more resources than you do. We're going to compete for that. We're going to have some conflict. We might feel that we've lost direction. And we're fragmented. We typically break apart and we move into our own little silos. We don't work together as a team. And the responsive phase as a team, we search for direction. How can we successfully navigate this change? The creative phase, we've got some new goals now. Our company is now embarking on a dramatic change. What are our goals going to be? How can we move forward on those goals? And then we move with an action plan to high-performing teams, to companies that are really working well together. By the way, teams go through this. And if you take a look at this shallow, if you will, this curve, one of the things that you have to do as a leader is to make that curve as shallow and as short as you possibly can, to move people through these changes as rapidly as possible, at the same time as productively as possible. So make it shallow and make it short, rather than a deep trough where people are experiencing dramatic change over a long period of time. Let's get them through it as quickly as we can and with as much enthusiasm and positive outlook as we possibly can. So let's take a look at the next little area here, which has to do with a quick quiz. Here's another poll. As you look forward and your organization begins to reopen, you want to resume operations, where will you be in that change curve? Will you be the reactive phase? Hey, still facing the anger part. Responsive, beginning to deal with the realities of it. The creative phase, how about setting some goals? And then finally, the productive phase where, hey, we've moved through this pretty quickly. We're already steaming ahead. We know where we're going. So take a minute right now, if you will, to figure out where your particular organization is in that change curve. Are you reacting, responding, being creative, or being productive? Wow, that's great. I love this. So most of you are either in the, creative area where you're thinking about how can we set meaningful goals that will align our people with our objectives. How can we enroll them in our vision of moving ahead, which is very positive. That's a pretty good snapshot of how local businesses here are facing the reality of dramatic change, that they're moving ahead. You know, most people want to think positively, and I think that's a great sign. So thank you for involving yourself in that poll. And Jen, thanks for making that happen. I think there's another thing to think about when you're driving change, and that's what I call the results pyramid. Effective leaders drive change, and they get results through other people. They create actions that are aligned. Where are we going, and how can we get people aligned with that vision? That they influence beliefs that we have about the organization, about our future, about the direction the company's taking. And finally, they create experiences that drive beliefs and actions and results. So let me take you through a little scenario here on how this pyramid really works. I remember one of the first jobs I had when I came back from the military was back in Chicago, and with a company that was a manufacturing company. And I was a frontline supervisor in the manufacturing area. And it was a job that was beyond my skills, but it was a learning position. So I talked to a more senior colleague and I said, hey, look, I want to get started effectively here. I want to make sure that I get off to a good start. What advice can you give me about making the right impression, getting off to a good start, and getting support of people here? And he looked at me and he said, don't speak up at meetings. Okay, so my experience was not to speak up in a meeting. Now, if you have that, if your boss tells you, hey, keep quiet, don't speak up for a while, the experience is not a happy one. What is your belief then? Well, the belief might be that if I speak up in meetings, I might be cited as perhaps somebody who's non-supportive or a questioner or a maverick of some kind. And so as a result of that, what do? Well, if I know I'm going to be penalized, the old Japanese expression, the nail that stands up gets hammered down. If I know if I stand up for something and talk about something, I might get penalized. So the action is I do nothing. I don't do anything. I don't take any action. And the result is that nothing happens. So in effect, this is how micro cultures are formed. You have an experience, you form a belief of that experience, you have an action that you take, and the results can be very positive. So if that boss had said, well, how about if you want to make a good impression, do your research and come up with some suggestions on a process here that might work. So that might be something I do. How can I then take the belief that I have, which is I'll get rewarded for good work. I'll get rewarded or at least acknowledged for a positive suggestion. The action it would be that I'll take more of those. I'll do that more forcefully and more frequently. And the result is that I will have found a way to move ahead in the organization. So very simply, you as a leader help to create the experience that people have, the beliefs that they form, the actions that they take, and the results that they're producing. So during times of change, this is especially true because people look to you as a leader as a trusted resource. So questions that you need to answer during this change period of time. Number one, why? People want to know, why are we doing this? And what's going to change? Who should communicate that change? Typically, it's the boss, or it might be the CEO. It might be a senior player, or it might be somebody who's on target with this thing, especially if you're thinking about a COVID change. If you take a look at the presidential briefings, the people who are communicating those changes are typically the people who are with CDC, the experts, the scientific and medical experts. How will the company know if the change has been successful? What will success look like? And then finally, when will these key changes occur? When's it going to happen? And when will the messages be communicated? These are typically things that you think about unconsciously, but need to be aware how they fall. And then the steps, the leaders' to-dos. And this is from Jack Webb, who was the former, obviously, CEO of General Electric and a real leader, thought leader in the world of management change. Number one, the change imperative. We owe you a compelling of why we're doing this. What's the reason? What's the how before the how? Number two, the vision. Establish a vision for that new state of affairs. People like to have a positive vision of the future. So one of the things that you have to do is kind of articulate a positive view of that future. Strong leadership, support from leaders at all levels of the organization is vital. The buy-in. If I'm going to implement a change, I want to make sure that I communicate it in such a way that you see a win for you, to engage you in maybe planning and implementing that change. And then finally, how do we keep it going? How do we measure it? How do we keep the outcomes that are shared? Right now, if you notice, our leaders, especially the medical experts across the country, are sharing all kinds of information about the metrics that we're facing in terms of the COVID-19 crisis here. So the basic human needs during that time of change. Number one, trust. The, if you will, the coin of the realm, the do or die foundation of leading. People have to trust their leaders. Who do you trust when it comes to getting information about the company that you're working with, your goals, your objectives, the state of the business, how are things going, what are our threats, what are our challenges? Compassion. Let's face it, you want a boss who seems to care about you. And people look to that boss as a little bit of a backbone, the feeling that they've got my back. My boss really cares about me. He or she wants to see me succeed. Stability, the best leaders are those we can count on in times of need. Nothing creates stability as quickly as transparency. I think Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, is a good example of that. Chancellor Merkel is a PhD in quantum chemistry. And she's not known as a dynamic or charismatic speaker. But one thing she's done throughout her tour of duty as the German chancellor over the last 2 or 3 months of this COVID epidemic is communicate very, very aptly and very, very detailed information about what COVID is all about. What are the repercussions? What's the science behind it? She's done painstaking interviews and painstaking briefings to let her people know what it's all about. And they've built trust with her. She's become probably the most effective crisis leader, crisis manager in Europe right now. Here in the States, Andrew Cuomo has done a magnificent job of keeping his people informed, not only of the positive effects of what they've been doing, but also the imminent dangers of COVID, and has done an amazing job of harnessing his people and their vision to wearing the masks and keeping the social distances and self-isolating. Tough love, if you will. And then finally, hope. People want to feel enthusiastic about the future. They want to know that things are going to get better over time. So how we instill hope as a leader, maybe just by walking around and letting people know you're there for them, is massive in helping people cope effectively with change. So your role in driving change, know your message, be prepared, be aware or certainly ready to speak to the themes and the arguments, support the team and the impact of change. Timely, accurate, honest communication. You can never over communicate in times of change. And then be prepared to answer or respond to common questions. And you can never repeat the information often enough. People forget very quickly, so you want to keep them always apprised of the changes. Know your talent. This is important. Who are your stars? Who are the people who are absolutely vital to the enterprise? You've got to keep them at all costs. And then the informal leaders, the people who don't have the title perhaps, but people who are eminently trusted because of their expertise. And they may not have the title, but they sure have got the respect of their colleagues. And then the disruptors. There might be some people, guess what, who don't always buy into your vision about change. And they're going to challenge you. And you probably want to hear from them because they're the people you're going to have to win over. Maybe you have a quiet chat over coffee with them. Here's why we're doing what we're doing. And here's why I need your help on this. And by the way, the term "I need your help" is a pretty powerful term if you're willing to do it. Leaders who often ask for their help are often highly respected and they build trust. And then finally, anybody or as at risk, is there a team, for example, or a group of people who are contemplating leaving the company? Hey, I don't like these changes, I'm out of here. And then if you're looking at people on the outside that you're courting as future candidates, let them know how the company's doing during this change. Here's what's happening. people love information. You can never overwhelm people with too much information. And then the 8 steps, and Kotter, and again, from his book, Leading Change, here are the things that are the steps to successful change management. Number 1 would be the urgency. Keep people informed. Keep the information relevant and real, and make the objectives clear. A guiding coalition, get the right people who can help you, maybe a team of 4 or 5 people or 2 or 3 that you trust. Get the vision right. Make sure that the vision is simple and clear and crisp. Why are we doing this? If you have a 4 or 5 people that you can care with and work with, help you craft that vision. A volunteer army. Get as many people as you possibly can that can work with you and make the technology work for you. More and more companies right now are obviously using the Zoom technique that we're using right now to keep people communicated with. But that volunteer army are people who can help you communicate the essential. You want to multiply your talents. Get the people behind you, help them advance your cause. Empower action. Let people, if you can, remove as many obstacles as you can, and encourage feedback, by the way. Feedback right now is considered one of the #1 tools that you as a leader have during times of change or any time. There was a study that was done, I think, by the Gallup organization several years ago about the impact of feedback. If you ask for feedback, hey, how am I doing? Or what can I do more successfully? Your level of trust among your peers and your colleagues will go up by 22%, simply by saying, what could I be doing better? If you ask for feedback and act on it, then your level of trust among your peers and colleagues will go up by 45%. And finally, if you ask for feedback, if you act on it, if you let people know the impact or the results of that feedback, what are the consequences, and thank them, your level of trust will go up by 72%. So don't be afraid to ask for feedback if you're a leader. And by the way, don't be afraid to accept it. Sometimes you might hear some things that you don't want to hear, but you gotta know them anyway. Short-term wins, let people know, for example, what we've accomplished. Today, we've achieved this particular milestone. Don't let up. Let people know that this is an ongoing change. You're going to make it happen. Let people know, get reporting, highlight the achieved milestones, and then finally make it stick. Let people know that reinforce the value of good changes by recruiting and promoting people and getting change leaders to back you. So weave it into the culture. So these are some steps that you can take that can help you achieve successful changes over time. But here's some things you can break the deal. Number 1, these are the 8 trapdoors to change. Again, not establishing a great enough sense of urgency. This is not that important. Or not creating a powerful enough guiding coalition. Well, the key people aren't supporting this. Why should I? Or lacking a compelling vision. What's the articulated hope that this thing is going to achieve? Under communicating the vision by a factor of 10. Typically, we don't let people know enough frequently what we're attempting to do here. Not removing obstacles. Maybe there's too many meetings, for example. Maybe people are confused by too many people with different stories. Not planning for creating a short-term win. Here's another one, declaring victory too soon. One is struck by the image of President Bush talking about the mission accomplished when he gave the speech on the USS Abraham Lincoln several years ago after the invasion of Iraq. He declared victory a little bit too soon, and it was embarrassing over time. And then not anchoring changes in the organization's culture. Make sure you understand the impact of that change. If you're going to, for example, introduce a dramatic new product or piece of software that really meets or squares with the prevailing culture, is it going to shake people up so much that they'll resist it? And then finally, one more trapdoor, I think, a deal-breaking factor would be not keeping people engaged and productive during times of change. And people want to feel that their job counts. They want a little feeling of stability, a little feeling of organization, some structure. But there's a simple solution to that challenge. And it's called, something that's been around for years and years, it's called delegation. We're going to talk about that in just a second here. And the engagement, everybody talks about engagement. It used to be kind of a buzzword for getting people to work a little bit harder. How can I keep my people engaged? Well, according to Gallup, when they did a 142 country study, State of the Global Workplace, and they said that only 13% of employees worldwide are engaged at work. That means basically 1 out of 8. Psychologically committed to their jobs, likely to go beyond the call of duty, to make dramatic contributions to the organization. The rest, varying stages of dissatisfaction and even in some cases at risk of misbehaving. Now, whether or not that applies to your organization, I don't know. Only you know that. But the key is that we want to make sure that people really understand what engagement is all about. And by the way, there's a secret here, and I'm going to let you know what that is in just a second. And that is that people want to be engaged. You don't have to do anything to really make that happen. You know, you don't have to incentivize them. You don't have to motivate them. You don't have to inspire them. You don't have to cajole or threaten them. People want to be engaged. People want to make a contribution. They want to feel good about what they've done at the end of the day. I can't tell you how many times people come up to me at the end of a workshop or a class at the college to say, I just wish my boss would give me something important to do. And it's really no magic here. It's a secret that we often abrogate. We discount the fact, and we don't delegate to people important assignments. And over time, most management theorists, whether you're a Harvard Business School or a Princeton or Yale, whatever my MIT, whatever organization, that delegation is probably the most effective tool you have to help people grow and develop. So an engaged employee is somebody who cares about the work. I play golf at Northern Pines Golf Course. Not today, but typically I do, and I love the game. And one of the fellows that works on the greens up there, his name is Jerry, and he basically cuts the greens and he operates the mowers around there, the big gang mowers up there. He's 85 years old, and he shows up every day, and he helps do a little bit more. He helps replace divots that have been torn in the turf. He does an extra special job of cutting around the greens and raking the sand traps. He's 85 years. He cares about the golf course. He's truly engaged. He doesn't make all that much money, but he loves what he does. And he's truly the definition, in my opinion, of engagement here. So again, experts agree most effective people to keep the people fully engaged and productive during times of change is to delegate meaningful work to them. Okay, so let's see how that works out here. Delegation defined is number one, the assignment of authority and responsibility to another person to carry out specific activities. However, the person who delegated the work, whether it be you or Joe or Jen or whoever, still is accountable for the outcome of that delegated work. Merely sending a delegation off, a task to somebody, means that you're still accountable for the end result as a leader. So I'm going to introduce what I call the killer app, a delegation tool that I think will help you both in times of change as well as in times of just normal business operations. Number one, it's a force multiplier. It's the most effective development tool that you have at your disposal. Giving a stretch assignment to somebody is really important. I remember when I was with Yahoo, one of the first jobs I had was to help build a team of people overseas. And my boss came to me and said, hey, you've lived in Hong Kong before, you've worked overseas. How would you like to go and help to organize our presence in the Far East, to build offices in Singapore and Hong Kong and Beijing and also in Malaysia? And it was great. It was a chance for me to step up to something that I hadn't done before, but it was a real stretch assignment. Probably the most important thing that I did and had more fun doing at Yahoo than ever before. So it keeps people engaged and productive. It fires them up. It uses their talents. People like to have their talents used. And then it gives you powerful coping skills, judgment, resiliency. Resiliency is the ability to respond positively to adversity. I think John Kennedy said that resilience is really the ability to, if you will, to stay calm under pressure. to show grace under pressure, plus ingenuity. Sometimes people come up with stuff that you never thought they could if you delegate that chance to them. It's a positive assumption you have about people. I assume that they will do good work. And so the keys to effective delegation: choose the right person for the job. Focus on the outcomes. Explain why it's important, why this is going to benefit you. Talk it through, make sure they understand, give plenty of information, deadlines, let them know when it's due. How about adequate? They've got to have the right tools at the right time in the right place. The level of authority. How much authority do they really have? How much decision-making power do they have? How much money can they spend on this project? Establish a monitoring system. And then finally, don't take the job back. And one key that I think is important is if the job is not being done adequately, that might be something you think about. Don't take the job back is often not ironclad. Sometimes you may need to do that. But if at all possible, you want to coach that person through the job and let him or her be successful. So good questions that you have to ask before you delegate to something. Does this assignment bring out the best in people? Does it, for example, utilize the skills and the expertise that they have? Does it make use of their skills? Is it interesting and energizing? Will they get a kick out of doing it? Will it bring out the best in them? And finally, will they feel good about it at the end of the day? Now, here's a way to look at this. When you're about to delegate to somebody, here's some things that you need to think about. How much do they know about the work? Number one, are they an expert? Are they the company or the organizational expert in a discipline? They've got advanced skills. They're great at doing this thing, and they're excellent at it. Number two, they're competent. They're good. They produce good results. They can design approaches and methodologies that will help to solve the problem. They're competent. They have some knowledge. Well, yeah, they're acquainted with it. They have some experience, and then finally, they're no knowledge. They're a neophyte. No knowledge. No knowledge of a specific task or discipline, or very limited experience with it. So one thing you need to know is how much do they know about it? Are they expert? Are they good at it? Are they have limited knowledge or none whatsoever? Then, how do they feel about the work? Do they love it? Are they can't wait to do it? They're fired up about it. Do they like it? They enjoy doing this type of work. Okay, they like it. Yeah, I can do it. Or they tolerate it. Well, I'll do it. You know, if I have to, I'll do it. I can get this done. Or they avoid doing this kind of work. So if you think about these two issues, you could put together a very simple matrix. I call it the Delegation Matrix. And we put this together when I was back with my company back in California for one of the pharmaceutical companies that we were working with. They really wanted to find a way that they could delegate effectively to people, but they wanted something that would be a tool that anybody could use. So if you take a look at this matrix here, we've got the expertise, the risk factor on the left side, if you will, on the on the vertical side, and of course on the top, the interest level. For example, let's say that somebody is an expert at a particular task, and they like doing it, so it's a major strength that they have. On the other hand, they have some knowledge, and they tolerate it. It's a danger zone. We may not want to delegate that task to that individual. Let's take an example here. Jen, who is my wingman today and helping make this thing work. Let's say that we're thinking about delegating a task to Jen, okay? And we know she's a pretty good planner because she helped plan the very successful trip to Slovenia and Italy last year for the chamber. It was a big success. And she's pretty good at that. So we know she's a pretty good planner. So let's say that we're going to have a company picnic. You know, companies do that in the summertime. They get together with their employees and they have, you know, sack races and horseshoe tossing and so forth. We're going to plan a company picnic. We're thinking about Jen to do it. Now, how much do you think she knows about this? Is she an expert at this, competent at it, some knowledge, or no knowledge at all? Okay, well, let's say that she's probably competent at this, okay? She may not be an expert at planning a company picnic, but she's competent, okay? She's a good planner, okay? Now, how about her level of interest in it? Does she just like it, tolerate it, she like it, or she love it? Well, we'd probably say she's competent at it, okay? And the interest would be, well, probably, what do you think? Probably a strength at it. So we now know that she's competent and she likes to do it. So it would be a strength. We could probably delegate this task to Jen, and she'd probably do it pretty well. Okay. So what I'm suggesting is that you can use this tool anytime that you're sitting down with one of your people and saying, look, I'm thinking of assigning this task to you. Let's talk a little bit about how would you rank yourself in terms of your expertise in this area, and how would you rank yourself in terms of your interest in this? Now, this does two things. Number one, it creates a dialogue between you and your employee about what they're good at doing, about what their strengths are. And number two, it secures their commitment once you assign this task to them. So it's an amazing tool that you can use anytime, at any place to help get this thing done. Very simple tool. It works during times of change. It works during times of normal business operations, but it's a great way to keep people engaged and involved, and it helps to bring out their best. People love to take on a role that will allow them to express their talents and their interests. So use this as a tool. You're going to get the copy of it when you get the rest of the deck here, but I find this to be very useful, and clients, I've used it very well. They love it because it's a simple tool. It's a no-brainer. So watch out for number one. You got to take care of yourself. And I think that self-talk during times of change, times of pressure, is really critically important. Talking a little bit about how the talk that you speak to yourself creates the kinds of actions, because if you think about it, thoughts and ideas drive actions. There's a great story about my friend Yogi Berra. We talked about him earlier. He was playing golf at a charity golf tournament in Florida one year. And it was a big fundraiser. And, you know, Yogi was a good guy, very socially conscious. So he's standing on the golf course on the first tee. And he looks out there, and here on the right-hand side of the fairway is a big lake. And Yogi says, you know what? I'm playing terrible. With my luck, I'll probably hit that ball right in the middle of the lake. And his partner says, oh, Yogi, don't say that. Be positive. And so Yogi says, okay, I'm positive I'm going to hit the ball in the water. And of course he did. So sometimes we talk ourselves. Our talk that we give to ourselves determines the actions and the results that we have. So be optimistic. It helps to have that positive mindset, okay? We can do this. We are resilient. We've faced adversity before. We know how to get through this, and we're going to do it together. Community is really important. Find sanctuaries. Too often, we're so busy doing stuff that we forget that we're also a human being. So where can you reflect a little bit and regain some perspective, a little bit of composure? And you can ask yourself, am I pushing myself and my people too hard? Am I at risk of burning them out? God forbid, including myself. And then reach out to confidence. Someone who cares about you, a coach, a mentor, a former boss, somebody that you trust, that you've worked with before, who knows you, could be a relative, could be somebody who cares about you. Bring more of your emotional work to self to work. Don't be afraid to have a little emotion. Show a little fun. Have some fun. Make this thing enjoyable, palpable if you can. And then don't use yourself in your role. Makes you very vulnerable. If you're so tied into a particular strategy that you can't release it and give up, then you're going to be tied to it, and it will probably close you off from other opportunities. Makes you less vulnerable. So some things to do when you're in that particular phase. Epictetus was a Roman general, never defeated in battle. He said, happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within your control, some things are not. And the change tip, you are in charge of you. You're responsible for what you do with the challenges life gives you. So don't waste time on things you can't control. I had a workshop, and one of the participants asked me, well, what happens if you have to implement change that you don't really believe in? And we talked about that for a second. And because you always have a choice. Well, number one, if you don't believe in it, you can do nothing, which could be career limiting, but sometimes doing nothing is a good thing to do. It's sometimes the best chance. Or You can dispute the change and you can challenge it with your boss and say, look, I need to understand this. I need to understand the reasoning behind this. I remember once when I was with Yahoo back in India, they used to have this as part of our performance review. You had to rank people in terms of two things. Number one was their performance, which is what they did, which is measurable, obviously. And the other was their potential, their capacity for growth. Well, I'm not a trained psychologist and I can't really evaluate somebody's potential because I'm not really good enough to do that. So I remember challenging my boss. So when I did the review of the people that I had, I put them high potential and whatever the performance was. And the boss said, you know, you can't do that because we've got this curve. You've got to respect and you got to abide by the curve and you got to rank them on potential. I said, well, I'm not qualified to do that and I'm not going to do it. So of course I knew at that time I wasn't being exceedingly brave because I knew I was going to leave the company anyway. But many people challenge that. So sometimes if you have a change that you either believe in or don't believe in, don't be afraid to get to the bottom. Challenge your boss. Why are we doing this? What's the rationale? Only then can you get behind it. Because you always have a choice. You have a choice of how you can operate in life and in business and obviously during times of change. Finally, a couple of key takeaways. Number one, the one constant we have in this world right now is change. We see it every day here in the Flathead Valley. As businesses reopen, as they challenge themselves to take on new roles in dealing with customers, customers are now feeling, well, am I ready to go back and shop? Am I ready to go out and dine out? Everybody reacts differently to change. Some people adopt at a very different pace. Some people are used to it, they love it, they thrive on it. Others are more resistant, and it takes time. Number one, think about where you are on that curve, if you will. Number one, understand how you adapt to change. Will help you to understand how your people and how your team adapts to it. So the same feelings that you have, the feelings of empathy are the same feelings that they have as well. So you can help them adapt to that change. Finally, focus your energy on what you can control and take the actions you can take to increase your adaptability. What can you do to stay current? Some things I think are important to do during times of change is, number one, don't be afraid to have a little fun. Do something good for yourself. Maybe cook a dinner that you really, really enjoy. Read a book that you find to be very inspiring. I find history is a really important, I think, indicator of what the future is all about. And I like authors who I think create senses of excitement and urgency and historical perspective. People like Doris Kearns Goodwin, who was the definitive writer about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Love the work she does. She wrote a book I thought was excellent called Leading in Turbulent Times, and talks about people like FDR and Teddy Roosevelt. I like inspiring stories like that. People who I think inspire you can help you get through this time. And there can be political figures, they could be family members, they could be people that you, college professors that you may have had. Think about people who kept you excited. So things that we can do would be to read, to do something fun for ourselves, to get out and walk around, to run, to ride a bike. Bike riding is increasingly popular these days. And basically connect with people who love and support you. We're gonna get through this. We're stronger than people believe. We've got the ability to be resilient and positive. It's gonna happen. So focus what you can do and help to increase your adaptability. So when you go back to work, choices, choices, choices. Here's a poll, and the last poll for our session here this morning. When we pick up, will we pick up exactly where we left off? Will it be business as usual when we reopen our door? Or will we start from scratch, start all over again, rethink our model, and maybe make some fundamental operational changes? Or will we take our time to thoroughly review the business landscape, the digital landscape, and introduce incremental changes? So will we take our time and do it gradually? So number one, will we do things that we did before, pick up exactly where we left off, start from scratch, or review the business and take incremental changes? So take a minute, if you will, and complete that mini poll. Wow. Well, like almost the entire group, 88% are going to take your time, take a look at the landscape, be deliberate, be thorough, introduce incremental changes, and do it with gravity and deliberation and intelligence. So thank you for doing that, guys. Very good. So a lot of businesses are going to make some changes, but they're going to introduce them over time, gradually. More of a transition than a dramatic change. Very good. Thanks, Jen. Thanks for helping out there. But I love baseball, and Satchel Paige was one of the great pitchers that never quite made it to the big leagues until he was almost 50 years old. But for years, he toiled in the Negro Leagues. And that was in the days before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier and integrated baseball. But he was known as a bit of a philosopher here. And here's some of his things. Number one, avoid fried meats, which angry up the blood. If your stomach disputes you, lie down and pacify it with cool thoughts, okay? Keep the juices flowing by jangling around gently as you move. Go very light on the vices, and such as carrying on society. The social ramble ain't restful. And then I love this one, avoid running at all times. And finally, don't look back, something might be gaining on you. So a little wisdom from Satchel that'll help you, I think, cope very effectively with the changes that are brought about here, especially in times of COVID. So thank you very much for being here on this morning with me and having coffee with me and hopefully thinking about changes and what we can do to be more effective. I think I love the work of a guy named Edgar Guest, who was a poet and a writer, but he wrote a little bit about when the Marines were at Belleau Wood in World War I, and they had to advance across this open field toward the woods behind which the German machine guns were placed. And they took massive casualties, but they won that wood. And his poem was, "For the honor of the fallen, for the glory of the dead, the living line of courage kept the faith and moved ahead." And in effect, you here in the Valley as leaders are part of that living line of courage, keeping the faith, moving ahead, showing resilience and championing change and helping your people through this, standing up for your community, standing up for each other. So thank you so much for being part of this. You can make the most of change. The past is a statement, the future is a question. So have fun, enjoy the day, go forth and change the world, and thanks so much for participating. Jen, I don't know if there's any questions, but we're happy to answer now if anybody has anything they want to talk about in more detail.
Well, thanks, Phil. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and pop those into the Q&A feature, and we can go ahead and go through those if we have any that come in. It sounds like I need to start planning a company picnic after this call.
Well, use the matrix, Jen, to see if you're really good at that too. You know, I think you could do it, but I think maybe we need some tipping on this.
Doesn't look like we have any questions. You covered a lot of wonderful ground today, and with everyone being able to get this slide deck, I think everybody's going to have a lot of great material to be able to reflect on, and I certainly was taking little notes throughout on different pages that I really want to key into. That matrix is really good that you just referenced too.
That's a cool tool, yeah.
So yes, I think it's wonderful. We'll keep it open. Oh, we've got a thank you, Phil, very well presented comment that just came in, and wholeheartedly agree. If anyone has any questions, Phil, you have a last slide that has your contact information, correct?
Yes, I do. There it goes. Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. So
I'm pretty easy to reach. Either my email address, quigley_phil@yahoo.com, or either my mobile, which is 831-332-4331, or my landline, which is 755-3488. Anytime, and it's been a pleasure to be, on Thinking Thursday. Jen, you did a great job of getting through this thing and being a good subject and being willing to plan our company picnic. By the way, when will that be? I want to make sure I plan for that.
I will get back to you here. You know, we do have a couple questions that just
Okay,
came in.
fire away, sure.
And to answer the question, will the deck be emailed to the participants? Yes, we'll go ahead and get that out to you right after the presentation. One of the first question is, what is your view on the tourism industry in the Flathead Valley? Will it come back?
Oh, well, probably they know, or you know as much as I do about this. I can tell you from my perspective, I think that business here is particularly vibrant. I think that people have a pent-up desire to really get out and support local businesses rather than to, you know, take the Amazon option, which is the easy way out. I think more and more we can make a difference in terms of whether the valley will revive or not by the choices we make in terms of our personal shopping. So I would say, you know, don't be afraid to go out to the local restaurants and give it a try, or a local shop that you'd like to maybe honor, or go to the local museum like the Hockaday or the community centers. The other thing I think would be very helpful that we don't do enough of here is maybe just get out and walk around. I think the business is going to revive. I do. I really do. I think most people feel that way. The signs are there. People have been waiting to get out. We've been very good about self-isolating, and now it's time to get out and have some fun and do some community. I remember the walks that we had at Christmas time here downtown. I think more and more of that is necessary. So yeah, I think in general, I think we're going to be fine.
Okay. Wonderful. We do have another question here too. It says, how do you balance wanting to keep your employees and team, but them not wanting to come back due to more money on unemployment with that extra
good question.
getting right now?
Well, first of all, unemployment will run out after a while. The $600 added bonus will I think end at the end of July, if I'm not mistaken. The second thing I think is talk to your people and reassure them that if they come back, you'll have adequate safety measures in the office, in the procedure to make them want to come back. The second thing is, I think, enroll them in the vision of where your company's going. People want to feel involved. I think most people would rather work than collect unemployment. I really do. I think people want to be fundamentally productive. They want to feel that they're making a contribution. So don't be afraid to say, look, let's talk about the reasons why we'd love to have you come back here and why it would be to your advantage over time, rather than sit back and collect unemployment, which can be very healthy and certainly necessary to do. It's a great bridge, but at the same time, articulate the exciting possibilities that you have for the business and their role in this. If you come back, here's where I see you going. Here's what I think you can do right now to contribute to that business, and I'll support you with that. Now they can say, no, I'm going to collect unemployment. That's their choice. But I think in most cases, if you engage them and says, we need you, we need your contribution, we need your energy, we need your passion, I think in most cases, people will respond affirmatively.
Wonderful. Well, I think that answers all of the questions that we had. Thank you for your comments, Phil. Wonderful. I will remind folks that we do have Thinking Thursday coming up again in June, on June 18th. And the Convention and Visitor Bureau will be presenting. So we'll have Diane Medler and Dawn Jackson from our own.
That'll be a good one too.
So we'll send you out more information on that program as we have it. And with that, I think we'll wrap up. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Phil, for a fantastic presentation. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one and change the world.